Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 11 of Into the Rift. I'm your guest host for the evening, Daniel Dracos, and joining me tonight is a panel of passionate esports personalities you've come to know and love. Dave Troop, Stephen Nguyen, Thomas T. Money Watts. Sorry.
There's a story there.
And our special guest tonight is Brazilian law expert Emily Rand. We have a multitude of topics to discuss, starting with a potential collusion behind Team Fusion's latest victory. Who wants to start us off with a brief overview of the situation?
I can do that. There's a very common thing in eastern regions where teams have what you call live-in subs. It's basically like creating a B team that's not on your official roster. I believe Chunky Fresh, who is now actually substituting for Team Fusion, was a live-in sub for Fusion while being on Team Confusion. Yeah, running that down is difficult. But with Fusion matching up with Confusion, you have somewhat spurious allegations of collusion between the two squads. And I know Daily Dot actually had to help Will Turton edit a piece that he published about it, and just basically saying this is an issue. But to management's credit for Team Fusion, they have said that they've tried very hard to explain it. So I guess if you're a glass half full kind of person, it's not a big deal. For me, I have a different opinion, but that's the overview of the quote unquote collusion right now.
Okay. Well, you mentioned that you have an opinion on the subject. How do you feel about it? Do you feel like there was collusion? Do you feel like it was inappropriate for Chunky Fresh to be a sub on Fusion?
Well, I think that it's reeked of a lot of just awkwardness. It's tough for me to believe that there was intentional collusion there, but I also think that Fusion needs to get kicked out of the tournament. It's not like this tournament has just dropped on somebody. You know, if it was a European tournament where Riot has not even released the bracket yet, okay, I can see some leeway there. But this is not a new thing. This has been known for a couple of weeks, and it was just like, oh, this happened. It's like, guys, come on. There is an argument that says Riot should keep an eye on this, but I don't buy that argument. I think that is ridiculous to ask Riot to control the teams to that point, because what happens when they do that? Then everyone bitches that Riot is too controlling. It's one of those things where, could it have been a legitimate mistake? Yeah, it could have been a legitimate mistake. But guess what? Legitimate mistakes have consequences. Get out of the tournament and reapply in 3 months.
I really don't think it was intentional or anything like that. I have such a hard time believing it. Like, if you look at that Confusion roster, you can't like, if Nintendo and Mac Noon lost to those guys, they were not going anywhere. And there's really no evidence to suggest that they would have lost that series. It wouldn't even have been close probably either. So to me, it probably was just a silly mistake, but I do think it raises an interesting questions about the ethics and like the murky waters that can happen in esports. Cause like, shouldn't there be some like basic rules that if you know even if you don't think you'll play them in the bracket, like even if you're on the same team, shouldn't you maybe not, like if you're on two different teams, shouldn't you not be on the same team at the same time? Like, pretty sure that's in every pro sports league. Like, you can't be on two teams at the same time, right? Like, I don't know any other thing where you could actually do that. So
everybody wants to have Tom Brady on their team in the NFL. Yeah,
jeez. Imagine if you could do that, just rotate them. Oh, you play Sunday, Brady? Perfect. How about you play for us Thursday, and then you play for the other guys on Monday, and then you play for your team Sunday? It'll be wonderful. Like,
sure, you'll just live on the plane.
But that's even less of a conflict of interest than we have here.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
We're supposed to be playing each other.
Exactly.
Tom Brady would have to have played for both teams simultaneously.
That would be ridiculous.
He just never gets time off the field.
Yeah, just never leaves the field. He's always on offense. That would be ridiculous. But yeah, basically, that is the situation, right? So, I mean, I think that speaks more to the lack of, like, I think that Riot shouldn't have to control that, but there should be some rules that, like, you can't be on two different teams in the same tournament. Like, not even as a sub. You know what I mean? You can't do that.
I think one of the big things is, it seems to me like subs need to be recognized as an official part of the roster regardless.
Yeah.
so that you
Agreed.
can't just have, you can't be a sub on a team and then be playing on another team. And if you are, you cannot be playing in the same tournament for sure. And despite the fact that I think both sides have released statements, confirming that this wasn't collusion, and Chunky Fresh and his team, multiple people have said that like, no, we're just backing down. We're never going to be able to prove anything because of the situation and how it is, but you're always going to know that there was that conflict of interest, and you can never be 100% sure. Because for all we know, like, money could be involved. I think it's unlikely, and despite the fact that, Fusion almost without a doubt would have won those games, they didn't win those games. Like, they did not play those games. So there will always be that doubt that something was wrong, and it does reek a little bit of like corruption.
Just people are just going to talk behind the backs. Well, this may have happened.
I will say, it's kind of a weird equivocation when it's like, oh, Mock Noon and crew should win. Monster Kittens took a game off Call White in the tournament in a huge upset. So, yes, you're right in that they should win, but that doesn't mean they will. And that's where I'm just kind of like, guys, what? But I do see your point.
So while this issue may have been a bit of a mess, the one thing we know for sure is that it did settle a best of 3 this weekend. The remaining teams, however, still had to play their games out. And while the results did knock out half of them, we got a glimpse of what to expect from the coming matches, and a little bit of preview of maybe some new talent in the LCS, and obviously some very strong rosters, and a lot of the rosters that were knocked out looked significantly weaker. How did you feel about the games?
I thought the games were really, really one-sided. I don't think it's worth going into any of the games specifically. Maybe if someone really wants to, we can. But I don't know. I thought they were all really, really straightforward. If a team that was expected to win lost a game, that was a throw. These were not high-quality games. These weren't even mid-quality games. These were just games.
The only good game. Sorry, the only good game was that Zenith versus F5 game 2, because I honestly thought Zenith was going to win the series in a sweep. Like, they were playing better, and then they just kind of threw that game, and then Final 5 come back and win.
And I think sadly that's a lot of the games that went, or a lot of the sets that went to game 3 were because of that. It was because one team threw really badly or gave up something they shouldn't have in pick and bans. And it worries me because when you have teams that are trying to bring into the LCS and they're struggling against these teams that have played together for like 3 months and are composed of like a couple players in Challenger and a couple players in Diamond, and you're losing games to those teams, like, what does that mean when they get to the LCS? What can we expect from the game quality when we get into that?
Well, I know that was a concern for a lot of people when they were decided to expand the LCS out in general. And maybe I can ask you guys, because it a bit ties into what we were saying about Team Fusion and their subs. Like, does that speak to a lack of really good players that are vying for LCS teams in the expansion tournament? Like, I'll be honest, I don't know a lot about NA and EU expansion. However, the fact that, first of all, you have subs going on different teams speaks to a general lack of talent. Like, if you can't find someone else who's equally talented to be on that team, and then additionally the games to get into the tournament, if they are so one-sided with one team being really overwhelming or one team just completely throwing it, what does that say about the depth of the talent pool in NA right now?
Well, for me, looking at the Challenger scene, looking at Challenger's 5 games, and having spectated a lot of these games, just ranked 5's game, keep in mind, not scrims or anything, for the teams moving up into the Challengers series and the Challenger bracket, more than anything, it looks like practice for mechanical skill and a little bit for team cohesion, but not for macro strategy or anything else that's going to help them in a competitive environment. So while I think that it's possible to find great mechanical players in solo queue, I think it's incredibly, incredibly difficult to find someone who has like a good sense of macro game strategy and a good sense of like really what their role is within the game at any point in the meta. Most of the time, these solo queue players that people tend to like look at and kind of worship, like Night Blue and people like that, are very, very good mechanically, but we're not impressed by people who have really good game sense, and that's my impression of it.
Well, the problem is solo queue is so different than ranked 5s, right? I mean, not even ranked 5s in LCS play, right? Like, the level, like the way the game is played is so different in that sense that it's almost impossible for a solo queue player to really become amazing right out of the bat. Like, they need the time. So I would think that and we do have some pretty strong mechanical players, which is why this whole we don't have talent thing doesn't really make sense to me, because it seems that we do have strong mechanical players. They just don't know how to play competitive play, and how can they learn without actually doing it?
Yeah, I think I agree. It's kind of a problem with fostering the talent, or the fact, I don't know, maybe they're just too lazy to try out like really extensive, maybe not lazy, but it's...
Well, in terms of stepping up, I'm sorry, Steven.
No, that's fine.
It just overall talent. I'm going to go back to my NFL references, and I apologize. I cover football. I wear my football hat a lot too. Even the best players, when you step into professional football or most professional sports, there is a learning curve, and it takes an extraordinarily special talent to just step in really well. You know, we celebrate Faker for like his first game. He went insane on Italy. Not very many people do that. So it's just like, you have to get in, you have to build the system, you know, the infrastructure argument, blah, blah, blah. I can see everyone who's watching this show's eyes glaze over, but you have to get the people in the system, and, you know, and that system is still developing. So I don't think there's a lack of talent. I do think there's a lack of developed talent. That's what I would take from the tournament.
Yeah, Thomas kind of put the words that I was trying to find in my mouth. Because like, if you look at other regions, even like Flame is considered probably the best top laner in Korea, but when he first started playing in competitive, he wasn't really that impressive, and all he did was split push 24/7 because that's the only thing he knew how to do. And he only played about 5 champions, and then it took 2 seasons of OGN to really get him recognized and develop him. And I think a lot of NA teams who are trying to get into LCS, or EU teams trying to get into LCS, they're going to try and find players who have some experience and just try to work off that, whether or not it's good or not, rather than trying to find the players with the spark to really go further.
Yeah, so do you think that speaks to the nature of LCS as a format, and how teams, you know, once they qualify, have to do everything within their power to stay in? And it's pretty easy, honestly, to get knocked out, especially if you're a challenger team coming in, just because the nature of the top teams is that they are already very established, and they pretty much have exclusive rights to the more experienced players just because they can afford to pay those players more. So do you think that to foster this talent and to develop this talent, we need to change the structure? Or do you think we need to change how we look at solo queue and change how we look at ranked fives and try to encourage an environment where you can get slightly more competitive practice, if competitive practice at all?
I think it's just a matter of the teams having the right coaches, right? Like, the thing we forget is that Korea has some like really strong organizations that have really strong support structures that can actually help mold these players. Until very recently, North America and Europe were basically a group of kids that played League together, with Dan as the mom. Like, seriously, that's what it was. You know what I mean? Like, let's be real. So the difference between that on a infrastructure level, which basically gives them such an advantage when you're talking about developing players. I mean, if you're talking about developing players, the teams that do that are always credited with having great coaching staffs, right? That can develop that talent. That doesn't happen on its own. So I think in time, we'll see, as we see North America improving their coaching, getting more coaches, getting more experience, we'll see that we'll be able to foster some of this talent better. But right now, we're basically asking solo queue players, fresh out of solo queue, to catch up to some people who have 3 or 4 years playing competitive professional League of Legends. And that's a huge amount of competitive experience that you have to make them catch up to.
So with that in mind, do you think there's any of these teams in the tournament that have a chance of coming into NALCS or LCS in general and being able to go toe-to-toe with these already established teams?
Well, I would have said Team Fusion, because they did come in with like a full support staff, but then I know they just lost Noblesse the other day, right? Mm-hmm. They released a press release either last night or this morning. So I don't know what's going on there, but that doesn't necessarily speak to having like a really, really strong support structure. Although I still do applaud that team for having, stepping in and being like, okay, these are people who are going to be supporting us and coaching and et cetera, et cetera. I think that's really good. And I think it's something that most teams should strive to have.
I think based on, it's tough to say, established teams with established infrastructure will be able to figure out the meta faster. But if you have a Team Fusion that comes in and for some reason the top lane teleport meta continues, or it becomes even more top lane centric, Mach Noon is going to be a great top laner in North America to the point that he might be able to carry. It's just the problem is it's so speculative, even in light of all the infrastructural differences. You know, we don't know what the meta is going to evolve to be. So I'm reluctant to say, yes, Team LOL Pro, yes, Team Fusion will come in and set the LCS on fire. But at the same time, I can't discount the possibility. You could see some crazy meta shift, particularly with, the jungle shifts. And you know what's going to happen. We haven't seen enough, or we haven't seen any professional games with the 2015 season patch. So it's hard to say.
And obviously this change between seasons is pretty huge. And I agree that it's hard to say whether or not they're going to be able to play incredibly well or break expectations. But do you think that do they have any chance at all? Do you think we're going to have like another Velocity on our hands where in their first split they got 2 wins and just got crushed for the entire season? So is that what we're going to see a lot with these 9th and 10th seed teams, or are we going to see a more balanced performance?
Well, I think we talked about this a bit when the expansion tournament was first announced, and we said for the first year or two, these teams were probably going to get stomped. I mean, the difference between Cloud9 and TSM and these guys is probably going to be quite substantial. But it might only be a split. It might be a year, depending on the teams that make it in and what their skill caps are. But as they're constantly playing and scrimming against better teams, they'll get better. It's kind of one of those things where the only way to improve at something is to make yourself play better people. They'll expose your mistakes. You'll see it. You'll improve faster, right? So.
Alrighty. Does anyone else have anything to say on the topic of these challenger games and on the teams coming in?
The next round's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah,
the next round will be a lot and I think this round was quite boring, but this round is actually there's a lot of series that could go either way, so it'll actually be quite interesting to see what and there's a lot of old familiar faces in these games as well, so it'll kind of be nice that way.
A couple European imports on Team Coast. I think it'll be exciting.
Coast actually looked really good, and Paler's Rengar was pretty good. He went off that first game.
Agreed. All right. So recently the votes for IEM Cologne came in, and the 3 teams that were decided by popular vote were CLG, Curse, and Gambit. So we don't know any of the remaining teams at this point for IEM Cologne, or even half of the roster for CLG. But I'm pretty excited about this tournament. I'm a huge CLG fan, and I like the 3/5 of their roster that they've announced so far. And despite their constant announcement that they're doing tryouts, we've yet to see a solidified roster. So starting with CLG, who do you think they can pull from? Keep in mind that they can import 2 players. Everyone that they have is an NA player at this point, and so they can pull from anywhere for these next 2 players. They need both a mid and a jungle at this point, and nothing has been confirmed. What do you guys think? Tom,
what's the backstory? Hit us with the rumors. I know you know.
know.
Really?
Really?
You had the look on your face.
I know you know.
The T-Money face.
Nope.
I'm putting you in the hot seat.
I am not going to. I do not deal in rumor in a public setting. If you want my comments, you will take them off air with the CLG roster. But no, I mean, what you're going to see with CLG or any of these teams is by the time IEM looks around, these teams will have seen at least a chunk of the expansion tournament. A bunch of teams will have gone to the wayside in the expansion tournament. And that could be where, some guy sets the expansion tournament on fire, but his team goes down. Well, get him in there for a trial. Mm-hmm. That's a likely avenue that hasn't really been explored. Given the failure with Seraph, you kind of wonder if CLG is gun shy bringing in someone foreign. I can't speak to that though. That's just a logical conclusion from what we know in the public sphere. So it'll be really interesting, but I'm not going to play with rumor to say what the specifics are as to who CLG has been trying out.
Oh, dang, I want to debate you into that.
But really, Dave? I wasn't born yesterday, I promise.
Oh.
Thomas is used to your nukes by now. I don't think you're going to get him with a surprise attack there.
Well, you got to try at least.
No preemptive counterattack, Mr. Bush. Nope.
But I don't know. I mean, I'm interested in what CLG will do. I don't really know what Curse has for options either at this point. In terms of mid lane talent, I'm guessing if I was Curse, I would probably wait for the end of the expansion tournament if you could. If Prawley's team gets knocked out, there's a good LCS capable mid that you could pick up. I mean, he's not Void Boy, but least you know you can hold his own. I don't know. It'll be interesting. I'm excited for the tournament though. It should be a lot of fun to watch. And I'm surprised. I'm really surprised about Gambit getting voted in. I won't lie. Like that team is so far removed from the Gambit everybody knows and loves that it's like hard to really be behind them.
Mm-hmm. Curse is going to be an interesting experiment for them, just because Voivo is the shot caller, and they can potentially get any player they want at the end of the expansion tournament, or they can even get Yusui from Low Pro, or Keen. That's his name. They can get Keen.
Yeah. They can get Keen. Yeah. He played pretty well. Mm-hmm. The mid-head was fun.
The question I have is, the tournament is scheduled to run from the 18th to the 21st of December, based on Esportspedia. Shout out to River, those folks over there. Mm-hmm. Does this roster have to be locked into the LCS? You know, could Curse pick up Keen and just run a tournament with him? Could CLG pick up, I mean, I don't know, whoever. I mean, I don't know the IEM rules is what I'm saying. Okay. And you could have this kind of like weird thing happen where where it's not the LCS roster, but it could be just something else. I don't know the IEM rules though, but it's an interesting possibility.
Didn't CLG do the Leicester? They had I can't remember his name for the life of God, but they tried out a jungler.
Yeah, Tricky or something.
Trick Z. Yeah. They tried him out in IEM last year before LCS, and then it didn't work out, and then they got Dexter. So yeah, it could be a try out for them because it's not a serious tournament. But technically.
Yeah, why not, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, if somebody does come out playing better after the end of this expansion tournament that doesn't make it in, like Thomas said, if somebody carries their team from the position you need, why not? You know, you've seen him play against other challenger teams. Like, yeah, they're not LCS teams, but at least you've seen him dominate competitive play very recently. So you know he could maybe do it again.
Mm-hmm. And from what I understand, does Liquid still own both LoL Pro, or maybe not Liquid, but the Curse organization still owns both LoL Pro and Curse Academy?
Yeah, they need to sell Curse Academy if it makes it in.
Or LoL Pro.
So he does have access to that entire pool of players to pull from at a moment's notice, and he does know those players personally.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so that leans a lot to the like pulling Keen theory, because from what I've seen, I'm pretty impressed by that mid lane play. As a good player, a solid player, definitely no replacement for Void. Similar to the same thing with Prawley, as I think that he could hold his own in an LCS, but maybe not the best choice. Although, like at this point, we're just dealing with rumors and speculation because it's so hard to say what anyone's going to do. And I feel like unlike last season, teams have been a lot better for the most part, aside from TSM Santorum, which I still don't think is confirmed, despite like him being spotted in the back of streams, and of course Zion Spartan poaching, quote unquote. Teams where I feel like have been a lot more secretive about their roster changes, and they've been keeping a lid on things. In this off season.
Mm-hmm. It just sucks for Curse financially because I mean, Boy was great marketing wise, right? Like he's got an army of people who love that guy. So
the Vubi army.
Yeah. Well, hey, I used to like him a lot. When I first started watching the game, he was one of my favorite streamers to watch. He taught me a lot. So
yeah, I loved his top lane play. I agree. He was an excellent streamer. And it's definitely it's hard to lose that personality. I think it's best to equate it. It's similar to CLG losing Double Lift, although probably on a lesser scale. Mm-hmm. So IEM Cologne is pretty far off, but IEM San Jose is right around the corner. And so most recently we saw the Brazilian qualifiers happen, and Emily.
I'm the only one who cares.
I care.
Yeah, we want to. Well, we're gonna get to see them, so yeah.
Yeah. So basically, in terms of IEM, what happened was there were 2 days of qualifiers. It was qualifiers for IEM and then also the Brazilian regular season of CBLOL. And they started off. For IEM, we'll start with IEM specifically. The team that made it is Pain Gaming, who, if you've actually heard of a Brazilian team, you've probably heard of that one because they have been around for a while. And they additionally, with their previous roster in season 3, they did almost make it via the international wildcard qualifier. They lost to Gaming Gear EU. And then this past year, they lost to CNB in the Brazilian qualifier, so they didn't make it to the wild card. And then Kaboom was actually a major upset coming out of that region. So yeah, it's Pain Gaming. They're a really fun team to watch. They're actually, like, I guess I shouldn't say this, I should stay objective, but like they're actually my personal favorite team in Brazil right now, just because they are really fun. Their AD carry is like very insistent on playing kind of weird stuff. Like earlier in this in another tournament, he busted out like ADTF. Always in solo queue, you see him doing random stuff like bot lane Yasuo and Jace and all this other stuff. So Lacti, he's really fun to watch. Their bot lane duo is really fun to watch. They have one of, if not the best mid laner in Brazil, and Kami, who, if you've heard of a really infamous Brazilian player, he would be one of them that you've probably at least heard of. He's been around for a while. I don't know. Maybe have you guys heard of him? I don't.
Yeah, Kami is consistently a top Twitch streamer, right under most of the NA personalities. He floats around like 7,000 views whenever I see him up there, and obviously has a pretty huge following. And from what I saw of the games, he's a pretty impressive mid laner. Definitely a dominant force in the lane, and despite Brazil's interesting macro strategy, I think he consistently does well in team fights and team situations.
Yeah.
So Emily, how do you think they'll do? Do you think they'll do well? Yeah.
Oh, they're going up against C9. So
their bracket is brutal. I saw it. I was like, damn.
So okay, so I love Pain, but I'm not gonna fool myself into thinking that they will be able to go toe to toe with C9, just because I don't think their macro strategy is good enough yet. I think they have a lot of, and I hate to use the P word, I think they have a lot of potential if they were actually able to play other teams internationally a lot more often. So I do think that they will be able to go and take a lot from it, even though, like, obviously I know that a lot of other regions, they really see this as a show match. They see this as something fun. For Brazil, it's really a chance for that team to kind of go and obviously, yes, have fun, but also see how they actually do stack up against teams from other regions. And specifically, C9 is one of the best teams in North America. So, I mean, I honestly don't think they're there yet. But I don't think it's an impossible situation where I don't see them coming in being like, oh man, I don't think they could ever take a game ever. But then again, I'm also the person who came into Worlds and said that Kaboom might be able to take a game too. So,
And you were right. So
you were right about
that.
Right there.
And no one ever will care about Alliance again. That's the Kaboom legacy right there. No, okay, so when we were
that's not true.
We talked a bit off the air about, in general, Brazil's meta and Brazil's macro strategy and what Brazil tends to. And one of the things that you said to me was Brazil has, this excellent mechanical skill, and all of their professional players are incredibly mechanically skilled. What do you think it's going to take for them to take their macro strategy to the next level in order to compete in international tournaments like this?
I mean, to be honest, it would take two things. One is probably just more international events, to be honest, like just more exposure to different styles of play. And that's not to say that they have to play a specific style, because honestly, I do enjoy watching Brazil. Like I'll be honest, like when you guys were watching the first day of NA expansion, I was actually spectating games through the client because I couldn't actually watch the stream. There was no stream. So I just spectated Kaboom Black's support player in order to watch the game. And they were expectedly one-sided because Kaboom Black was one of the teams expected to make it out of that first day of qualifiers. So some of the games they won in like under 20 minutes. But it's going to take that, and then it's also going to take more regular season play, and it's still it's still unconfirmed as to what officially unconfirmed as to what the regular season's going to be. It's just been announced that it's going to be CBLOL. There's going to be 8 teams. They were decided in the qualifier this past weekend. And more regular play where they're actually playing each other in a professional setting, teams getting coaches and support staff so they can actually look over the meta and like develop their own thoughts about it and develop their own strategy about it. Because I think a lot of regions, and specifically regions that are not Korea, and to some extent China, and I will not pretend to be a China expert either, but you see a lot of teams, and instead of trying to develop their own strategies, they tend to fall back and copy others' strategies or look at what's popular. And I think Brazil does have, again, I hate to use this word, but like they do have the potential to come up with their own really cool, awesome stuff to watch. And what that requires is regular play against each other. Like outside of scrims, they need to professionally play each other a heck of a lot more than they did in 2014. So we'll see. I'll announce when I know what the format's going to be, and I'm sure they will too. So.
Well, I just have a question. I fully admit that I'm a Brazil, I know that's probably the region I know the least about. Given that Kaboom did pull off the Alliance upset and they had that international experience, you said that Brazil teams need to play internationally a little more. Have you seen any kind of overall Brazilian meta shift resulting from Kaboom's performance internationally, or is it too soon to tell?
It's really too soon to tell because I have only seen tournaments that have gone on since Worlds. It was a minor tournament, another tournament going on while Kaboom was at Worlds that they actually kind of forfeited attendance to attend the World Championship. And then it's been a couple of other minor tournaments a week. So they are playing each other regularly, but I haven't seen any sort of drastic meta shift other than one really cool thing they will do, or one thing to, I guess, watch out for that a few teams do is that they will send, if their AD carry is a really good duelist, they will send them to basically split push a side lane sometimes. But I mean, there hasn't been any sort of overarching, oh my gosh, they brought back, Kaboom brought back, this ridiculously awesome playbook that we're now just going to rifle through and immediately memorize, and then bam, suddenly Brazil is the best region in the world. No, guys,
they're going to bring back Mordekai's into competitive play. Woo!
Yeah, exactly. That's not how it works. It takes time, and it takes a support structure, and it takes regular play, regular professional play. One of the pros I spoke to the other day, I asked him when he started playing professionally. And he's been playing for a while, but his response was, I only started playing professionally when I was on this team because they actually had a gaming house, because they actually had coaches, because they actually had this stuff. So, I mean, that's what you need to develop your own strategy and to understand all the nuances of the game. You need people to talk about it. You need regular play, that kind of stuff. That's really what Brazil needs.
So when we...
I was just curious. Do we know what patch that IEM San Jose is going to be played on?
I think it's the...
419?
I think it's going to be the new... But I thought there were rumors that it was going to be on the new...
So patch 420?
Map, but I honestly don't know. Yeah.
That would be too awesome.
Because that's going to be really...
Yeah.
If it's on patch 420, it's on patch 420, I give Pain suddenly their chances rise a little bit.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Kami's just going to carry that team.
Well, at that point, who knows, right? Because, I mean...
Yeah, exactly.
It'll be just craziness. I would love that.
I'm skeptical that they would do that, but it seems to me that would be the greatest tournament to watch ever because everything would be chaos and it would be so little time to prepare.
No.
It would completely ruin the competitive integrity of the tournament because you'd have no idea. It would have absolutely given no indication of what team was the best. It would just give whatever.
Well, isn't that kind of what Korea's had for Doji and Winter for the last 2 years? They start really the OJ Winter starts at what, like late November technically.
Yeah.
That's when the new season patch kind of hits. It would be kind of the equivalent, just not Korea.
I guess, yeah. I hadn't really thought about it like that.
I would just love to see it because the meta would be such a freaking mess for like a month. Just because we would watch this one tournament, someone would cheese with something, and then for 1 month people would think it was the best thing on the face of the planet until they realized like just how little they knew about the new Summoner's Rift. I would prefer, frankly, as a competitive tournament to see it on a prior patch, but I think as a spectator, that's probably the most exciting thing you could see is like a fresh patch with little time for teams to prepare, because it would just be a mess and it would be exciting to watch.
Because, for example, I was talking to he's Shakara's on Twitter. No, on Twitter, he's also known as Kalba. He's a Challenger EUS player.
He sucks at Kale. That's all you need to know.
He plays nothing but Kale. Can't play Kale. Yeah. We were theory crafting some of the new items on the PvE patch, and he told me that getting one of the jungle items as a laner is really good because one of the new smite upgrades is that you can smite champions now, finally. So I think he said that it's more gold. It's cost efficient. It's one of the AP items. I don't know what it's called, but we can see all these really exactly. We can see all these really weird item builds and strategies because there's a lot of new tank items like Megatron Cloak's not even in the game anymore, which makes it really sad. So it would just throw everything against the wall.
One thing to keep in mind, though, is that we could still play on the new Summoner's Rift visually, but not have all the new items and a lot of the newer changes like the Scuttle Crab or all of those things that are going to change the game a lot. But we will still see, regardless, if they use the new Summoner's Rift, they're going to be using, most likely, the new Dragon and the new Baron, which are going to change things a lot. I don't know how much experience you guys have playing on the new map, but the new Dragon is almost definitively more difficult in every circumstance, except for like one or two fringe cases. Like if you've seen on Reddit, there's the videos of Fiora and Pantheon like soloing the dragon just because they have abilities that interact really well with Dragon's new animations. So how do you think, if all we see is a change in Dragon and Baron, do you think that changes teams' macro game? And if so, like how? Is Dragon less of an objective now? Is it more of an objective because it's more difficult to take?
I don't think so. I mean, these guys were taking it really quickly right away. Like these guys, they're pro players, and I mean, it's not that big of a change. I played on it quite a bit, and it's harder, but it's not like I don't think it'll make that big of a difference. And Baron, I think, is actually easier to take because a lot of the damage you can see coming. Like he has like very noticeable attacks that you can dodge in some cases. Sorry, I just have a bit of a cold, but I don't think it really will change much. We might see more Baron rushes though. If like I'm not entirely sure, but I feel like it is easier to take Baron a little bit because you can dodge some of these attacks. You might see a few more Baron rushes, but other than that, I don't think so.
Alrighty. So changes aside, one thing that I kind of missed and should have discussed when we were back about talking about challenger teams is we had a question on Reddit today. And it was, if you had to create a roster with the most promising players from NA and EU, the expansion tournament specifically, what would it be and who would be on it and why? So does anyone have any opinion on who the strongest players are at this point and who would be the best? What's the dream team? The team that could come into LCS and stand a chance, that could wreck face. What is that team and who would you put on it?
Mocknoon and Keen for the solos for sure. AD carry would be interesting. I want to see how Nian Tanso goes back. It's neat,
I will say I have been watching Nian Tanso. He's a friend of mine on League, so I get to watch his games occasionally, and I will say that he is 2 times better than he ever was as a top laner, like just a random number, but he is significantly better. I mean, just in solo queue, he used to float around like mid Diamond 1, and now he's instantly into Challenger now that he started playing AD carry. And his performance in scrims has improved, and his attitude seems much better when I talk to him. So for me, I'm really excited to see Nian Tanso as an AD carry, but until I see actual tournament results, I can't say anything for sure, but most likely he is who I would put on my dream team roster at this point.
I have a slightly different one. I would agree with Mocknoon. I would go Impaler and Jesus because Keen looked good, but Jesus didn't like. Jesus played in the LCS and he didn't look great, but he held his own for a large majority of it. He looked kind of fine. So I would take that over Keen if I was making an LCS team. And then for the bot lane, I'm debating between Robert X. Lee and Robert X. Lee and Cop, and then I would take Sheep. Probably. That would be my 5.
Sheep did do pretty well during his brief time in LCS, and I honestly, he's the only support in this tournament that I'm familiar with. Glebe Glarb has dropped out now with the most recent Fusion announcement, and Chunky Fresh, who's a mid laner, will be replacing him, I guess. So if Glebe was still on the table, I might pick Glebe. I really like his play, and I think he's an excellent professional player. But I think you're right. Without Glebe, I think Sheep is definitely the standout support for this tournament.
For me,
Bunny did okay too.
Yeah. For me, I'd go with McNoon, Keen. I'd probably go Neon Tunsa for AD carry too. I used to watch Neon play way back in season 2. He was always impressive as an AD carry. It was maybe kind of sad that he moved to top lane. So I'm glad he returned to his roots. For jungle, I might go Saint Vicious or Impaler, only because I don't know how much of a lead. Because if I'm making a team, I need a leader. And Saint may not be. He may have had a burned mark on his record with all this missed smites, but I think he's a pretty decent leader, and you're gonna at least try and bring them together. Or I don't know how much of a leader Impaler could be. For support, it's either Bunny Food or Sheep. I think they're both pretty good.
I'm not a fan of Saint in any way, shape, or form. As a person, as a player, but as far as talent goes in this tournament, I think if you're not taking Jez as an Impaler, he is definitely the choice, clearly. So with the new map, kind of jumping around here, another question we got was, how do we feel about the new changes to Baron buff, Dragon, Towers, and Jungling? And we got into it a little bit, but how do you think it's going to affect the meta in general with this huge, I guess you could pretty much say a buff to Jungling because of how powerful Smite is going to be as a summoner spell? What do you guys expect to see, if anything, change? I know you mentioned the jungle items on laners. Do you think it's so powerful that, kind of like last season, we're going to see them alter these items repeatedly just so that they can make sure that the only person who can take this item, is a jungler? How do you see it affecting the game in the immediate future and maybe in the long term? What do you think Riot is trying to push towards with these new changes?
Well, when you kind of brought up the jungle item thing that I brought up earlier, I don't think it'll go wild because you're forced to take Smite if you want one of those items, and that's a really big risk you have to take levels 1 through 3, even 1 through 6. But the idea behind that strategy was that if you made it past that, the item's way too cost efficient, and then it doesn't really matter if you're Smite because you can Smite the champion. That's kind of like the offensive summoner spell there. But yeah, I don't think it'll leak it. The jungle items will leak out into the lanes that dramatically. But I haven't played around with the new jungle as much recently, so I don't know what jungler is going to be the strongest. But depending on what junglers are strongest, that can change what kind of picks you see in mid and top. So. I'm
interested to see what type of changes the towers will have really on the macro game, because I think that with the inhibitor towers being much stronger now, it'll be much easier to kind of turtle out if you don't get caught at that inhibitor tower. It'll be much harder to dive that with the strength of that laser beam turret. So it'll be interesting to see, does that create more split push comps to try and avoid that, hiding under the tower?
It hinders split push comps. The way the inhibitor tower works. Okay, well, first of all, you have to consider the second row of towers, right? The mid tier towers. Yeah. They have the shield buff. When you walk past it, it gives you a shield, and the shield increases in potency over time. That is supposed to help stop split pushing. And also, the inhibitor tower. One of the reasons why split pushing is so good is because a lot of split pushing champions can dive under tower when they're super strong, like Nasus, Jax, Kayle, even whatever. And the way the tower damage works is that the laser, if you've played StarCraft 2, it's like the Void Ray. If you have it, the way the laser works is that it increasingly does more damage over time, the longer it focuses on one target. And if you're tower diving, that means it's going to be on you the entire time, and that is going to be exponential damage. So the way the tower changes work is that's supposed to help prevent split pushing.
So it's even stronger scaling than it is currently? Because right now it scales too, but you're saying it scales even stronger.
It scales faster.
Okay.
Okay. So one thing that I noticed with this, with the changes to the towers, is that one thing we see, especially lower tier teams struggling with, is breaking an inhibitor tower. You know what I mean? When they get to that point in the game where all of the outer towers have been taken, they struggle to break that inhibitor tower. And a lot of times that's why we see teams split push. I know we see that a lot in Brazil, and I think that's a lot of the reason. Do you think this is going to make it even harder for teams without like that really clear sense of macro strategy to end games? Or are we going to see more games where teams take repeated barons and just struggle to end games until someone makes a mistake? How do you think it's going to affect game length and teams' abilities to close out games?
Well, it sounds like it's going to be really hard to dive too, right? Like if the tower makes it an increasing, like if it's increasing exponentially and much faster, it sounds like it'll be harder to pull off just a straight 5v5 dive. So you might see like the reemergence of neutral objective control comps, like pick comps and stuff like that, as that would be easier to end a game than straight up diving or trying to pull it'll be more focused around getting a fight at an objective, because you'd have to be super, super far ahead to dive those towers and win a fight at one of those towers by the sounds of it, right?
Yeah, well, something I forgot to mention is that it works similar to the current, right? The damage ramp up resets when it switches targets. So I don't know if it'll be that much harder to dive a tower 5v5. I don't think it will. I think it'll just be one of those cases where if the tank tanks the tower too long, he's obviously just going to die way faster. So they just need to coordinate it a little more to switch targets and get out of tower range and back in tower range, whatever. Because split pushing isn't really an answer, maybe, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be that much harder to dive 5v5.
Sorry, go ahead, Tom.
No, I just want to jump in. Given what you're describing, the coordinated teams are not going to give a damn about the upticked damage. I mean, you already see. I'll pick on China. China do dive.
Yeah.
Straight up go old Najin sword do dive.
I got the swimming goggles up.
Yeah, but it's like, okay, we have to relearn how to juggle tower aggro. Well, they're already pretty good at that. Is it going to require some changes? Are you going to have to be a little bit? Are you obviously going to have to change some of the specifics? Absolutely. But I'm sorry, if you're a top team in the world, you're already pretty good at this. And it's just, as opposed to rebuilding an entire house, it's just kind of, changing a room a little bit. That's the metaphor that I see it as personally.
And I think at this point, given that I don't know if teams are playing on the PB at all to test these changes, or if they're just waiting for a patch to go live, but it seems to me that we can't really be sure of anything at this point. Although I think we've raised good points about how we think it'll affect the meta. We can't be sure until we actually play these changes ourselves, and then until we watch, professional teams and professional players have access to this patch in a public setting. So it's going to be difficult to see, I think, until it goes live and until we see a tournament with this patch in effect. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to say?
Nothing off of my head.
All right. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Episode 11 of Into the Rift. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to follow this lovely panel on Twitter. And for all things esports, be sure to check out Paravine.com. You can also find Paravine on Twitter at Paravine Network. Thanks again for watching. Anyone have any goodbyes? Shoutouts?
Shout out to all you crazies at LOL Esports that are watching the show. I expect a ton of crap from you in freelance chat here real soon.
And you deserve every bit of it. But thanks for you for coming out and hosting this for us. It was appreciated.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel.
We need to step in. Thank you to Emily for coming on, enlightening us about Brazil.
Some excellent.
Thank you for teaching us the gospel of Brazil.
And
I don't think I really did that. But.
and just as usual, thanks to everybody who just tunes in, and that's who we do it for.
Alrighty. Thanks for watching, everybody. Good night.
Mwah.
Bye.